I guess this is a case where we'll have to agree to disagree.
I don't agree to that.
Neither do I.
Ooh, yeah. I'm gonna have to go ahead and sort of disagree with you there.
Pluto's not a planet. They changed it in 2006.
Yeah, I heard about that, Morty, and I disagree.
You disagree?
That's right. It's possible to disagree in science, Morty. Pluto was a planet. Some committee of fancy assholes disagree. I disagree back.
Disagree to Disagree podcast. Daryl Fisher along with Fernando. How you doing tonight, Fernando?
I am doing great. How's it going in, I forget, what city are you in? This is Milwaukee?
Milwaukee, you wish.
Ish.
Other side of the state. Farther south even. We're
south.
We're like Dubuque North.
Okay, like can you see Minnesota from your front lawn?
No, but I can see both Iowa and Illinois if I go to a certain spot in the county.
Ooh, nice. That is
yeah. So if
that like
that
greatest part of America, God's country, right there.
Yeah, or Cowboy Stadium if you're a Dallas fan. That's God's country.
That's true.
Oh, we have so much fun stuff to talk about because you know what? It's just you and I. So it's kind of like speed dating, but neither one of us is going to get lucky tonight.
That sucks too. Yeah, what's up with the other? I don't want to call them losers. I could. Tones and Collins are probably still celebrating the Cubs winning. I mean, they've had 4 of their generations of family members not experience that, so they probably don't know what to do with themselves after something like that happens.
You know, I had heard that the Cubs World Series parade was the largest gathering of people in the United States. Like something over 5 million some people were at that parade.
Wowzers.
Yeah. So
that is a lot of people. Yeah, I heard that too. I mean, but you got to think, like, there are Cub fans all over the country. They probably all just migrated to Chicago for that week and a half.
Man, they couldn't even get that many people for the Million Man March. 5 million coming through for the Cubs, so glad to see that. You know, the lovable losers, well, we'll still see if they're lovable come this next season.
Yeah, now it's over. Like right now, the new lovable losers are the Cleveland Indians because they have the current longest stretch of not winning the World Series.
Correct. And, you know, they were in it. They had their chance. They were in a World Series recently, too, within the last 10 years. So.
Correct, yeah. So that was good. But I will say that was probably, I mean, since Game 7 of the 1991 World Series, that was the greatest World Series game I've probably ever watched. Like, just with the whole comeback from Cleveland going to extra innings. The rain delay kind of made it sour for me. That was the only thing I didn't like about it. I would have liked to keep playing it through. But it was probably the best World Series game I had seen in almost 20 years. Or 25 years. Yeah,
it was definitely a good series, I think, all around. Just the fact that, they were... It was competitive there for the back half, although a lot of people, you started thinking, hey, it's over and when Cleveland went up 3-1, but, Cubs showed it takes you got to win out of the 7, so. Well, let's get away from the boys of summer because the boys of fall into winter are certainly well in the swing of things. We'll take a quick look at our jockstrap NFL Pick'em.
Which I forgot to submit my picks last week. I think I realized it halfway through the afternoon games, so I only submitted the late game or the night game on Sunday and then the Monday night game, both of which I'm pretty sure I got wrong.
Well, we've got a pretty tight race here. The top 5 positions, top 5 teams, 1 and 2 are both tied with 86 total points on the season. The Master Deflators in Dak We Trust, they're tied at 86. Hey, Would You Blow Me, Lick My Punt, and a Tinker Stinker all have 85. Kind of drops off when you get to me down at One Nation Under Goodell at 79. Adrian Peterson at 74. Kyle Spurley checking in at 72. Tones at 69. T Blow Me 68. The Mother Suckers at 67. Purple Pride 67. And I've got a feeling the underdogs have just given up, or they're just not even trying to pick. They have 26 points. So
they could just be picking the underdog every week just to make that comeback, but the underdog isn't coming through like they'd like. So
that very well could be. And you can keep up with it, follow along. It's going to be a very tight race here again with 5 teams right at the top, all within a point of each other. And then the next 2 or 3 teams here are within, 10 points of that. So, well, you look at the rest of the NFL, and if anything, mediocrity is probably the best word we can use. At least in my mind. I mean, we have teams that just either you can't tell week to week or quarter to quarter what they're going to be. And you look at the entire, say, NFC East, they're all above 500. But the only one, Dallas at 8-1, but the rest are just kind of, Giants are 6-3, Washington 5-3-1, Philadelphia 5-4. Even the NFC West, Seattle 6-2-1, Arizona is 4-4-1. The Rams are 4-5. The NFC North, Detroit and Minnesota 5-4. Green Bay 4-5. Chicago, not as bad as the dumpster fire in San Francisco, but still at 2-7. You look at the NFC South, Atlanta 6-4, Tampa Bay 4-5, New Orleans 4-5, Carolina 3-6. Your NFC champion from last season is sitting at 3-6 at this point in the year. And you look at just all those other teams, there's not really the few that stand out to you. Maybe Dallas, but again, do we have as much faith as we want to in the Cowboys going into the back half of the season, into the postseason?
It's hard to tell, too, with rookies. I mean, the NFC East is almost taking over the league with their rookies. I mean, you got 2 rookie quarterbacks in that division. You got the Redskins are pretty much doing what they did last year, starting off slow, kind of struggling early on, and then picking it up right now. Last year they were the NFC least. Now that is possibly the best division in football this year.
Yeah, you look at what's happening with, these teams, and Philadelphia, even though they're at 5-4, they've actually outscored their opponents by over 60 points. I mean, they've had a good run here, and it's so hard to tell what's going to happen along with those. But you look at those games, those teams. Was it just this past week that we've had teams that come out of nowhere? I think it's like they're not going to win. Minnesota and Washington this past week. The Vikings went in, and of course they've been on this slide here, but the Redskins come in and, actually it was on the home win for Washington, but they ended up winning 26-20, and that was a Vikings team that was, again, had a lot of promise early on and has since started to kind of take a tumble. So,
and I want to know I don't even know what happened. I mean, I've watched every single Viking game this year. Side note, very glad to hear Blair Walsh has left. I feel bad for the guy. He, choked in the playoffs. He had a great rookie, slowly downhill since. But, their defense has struggled since. Offense, I mean, injuries are catching up to him. That's pretty much the bottom line.
Yeah, the question then is, on the defensive side, is that where they're starting to kind of fall apart? Or is that something that's happening for them or not? You tell me. You're more the expert on the Viking side than I am.
Well, I mean, for the first 5 games, when we started 5-0, they're averaging like roughly 9 to 10 points per game. They had a streak going on. I want to say it was about 9 consecutive games dating back to last year where they hadn't allowed an opponent to reach, I believe it was 17 points, so 16 or less in all those games. And then again at Philly, we did give up. They gave up the special teams touchdown, but like Chicago kind of dominated them. Washington was able to move the ball on them. I mean, defense is struggling, but injuries are definitely catching up to them, especially on the offensive line. Man, is that offensive line? It is rough. It is by far the weakest part of the team.
So it's one of those things where you mentioned the injury aspect, but the standpoint that you really do have the grind of the entire season, and it's the lack of depth that the Vikings don't necessarily have to compete for the rest of the season. And that's, again, they're still at the top of the division, tied with the Lions, both at 5-4.
But just a side note, Detroit does own the tiebreaker since they beat the Vikings a couple weeks back in a game that, the Vikings kind of blew it down the stretch. They had the lead, and with 30 seconds left, we had a 3-point lead, and we let Matthew Stafford drive the ball down and get into field goal range for like a 58-yarder to win it, or to tie it, and then they just blew it in overtime.
And here's something someone brought up to me today, or maybe it was yesterday, but when you look at the NFC North, you realize Chicago and Green Bay both have 2-1 records in the division, the Bears beating both the Vikings and the Lions. So their 2 victories have come against divisional opponents.
Yeah, so the Bears and again, I think aside from the game, the Vikings beat the Bears in Chicago last year. That was their first win since 2007 in Chicago. So even going into that game, even though the Vikings were heavy favorites, I did not feel good about that game one bit. Like, I saw a lot of people talking how easy it would be. Like, nah, not in Chicago. Like, Jay Cutler is a different player when he plays against the Vikings. Just plays against them. Like, I think, the only winning record he has against a division opponent is against the Minnesota Vikings.
While we're still on the NFC, when you look at the matchups, especially this past week, there was a lot of talk with the Seattle and New England game. Do the Seahawks start to set themselves up as your, I don't know if I want to say favorite, but who you'd lean towards to represent the NFC when it comes to the Super Bowl?
I mean, I got to go with the Cowboys. I mean, I don't like saying this, but they do have the best record, and I mean, every tough opponent they play, they win, they dominate. I mean, Seattle is definitely the second runner, but there's a lot of teams that seem to be underperforming, especially compared to last year. I mean, I know every year is a different year, but I mean, I could almost go with any of those top 3 teams in the NFC East, and then Seattle. They seem to be the top 4 teams right now at that midway point of the season. But I mean, at the beginning of the year, you could say it was easily the Vikings, and now all of a sudden they fell off. So it's like, can those 4 teams keep it up?
The most interesting stat I heard about the Seahawks, I believe over the past 3 seasons, so including this year and I believe the previous 2 years, or maybe it was the previous 3 years, but in a 3-year span, let's say, and it could be more, the Seahawks have not lost a game by more than 10 points. All of their contests, and I think only 2, maybe 3 of their losses over the past 3 years have been by more than 8 points. So you're looking, you realize over the course of, a season, in multiple seasons, they're able to stay within that 1 to 2 score range. So that's an extremely impressive stat to be that competitive for that stretch of time, and really you give yourself an opportunity to, if you can stay, like I said, within that score. So, and again, only losing by a field goal, a touchdown, you're in the game, and that's what it takes, is just to stay competitive, and you don't know what's going to happen, come those final couple minutes of any game.
And that's what it always comes down to, too. I mean, if you're going to be a choke artist, you're not going to get anywhere. And obviously, with that kind of those numbers, they play good 3 quarters, but then they excel down the stretch, which is, that is what you're looking for.
Now, when we swing it over into the AFC, there's starting to be some teams that maybe we didn't necessarily see that are starting to emerge. And New England, of course, we kind of all had a feeling that the Patriots would be the Patriots. Again, they're leading the AFC East at 7-2. But when you look at the AFC West, you have Kansas City 7-2, Oakland 7-2, defending Super Bowl champion Denver 7-3. And you start to wonder, it's like, I don't know if anyone really saw the Raiders coming out as well as they have, again, taking one of the top spots in their division.
I mean, yeah, after last year, I kind of assumed they'd be better this year, but I definitely didn't think they'd be as good as they have been. Especially, I mean, that is, I did say the NFC East might be the best division, but actually it could be that one. I mean, you take the Chargers out of that one, it's by far the best division.
And even with the Chargers, again, they're 4-6, but
which again isn't terrible. I mean, you look at Cleveland at 0-10, and then even the Bears 2 and whatever. But yeah, 4 wins still at this point, and that's last place. That does show, and everyone's kind of all over the Raiders. I honestly think the best team in that division is the Chiefs. They're the ones who that nobody's talking about, I guess, and that's usually the team that'll sneak up on you. Like everyone, I don't know. Maybe I see too many Raiders fans every day, and I just want them to lose because, Raiders fans kind of suck.
The thing, I think, with Kansas City is if they were able to put anything together on an offensive side, they would be quite the powerhouse in that division. But, they appear to be... It's a defensive-minded team. They know exactly, what they want to do is hold people down, and... they're going to win some ugly games, and no one's going to be the first to 20, essentially, as the winner. San Diego, again, as I mentioned, at 4-6, but they're also outscoring their opponents on the season by 2 touchdowns. So
I was going to say, too, like overall, San Diego, if a football game was 58 minutes long, San Diego might be undefeated.
Right. They always find a way that, either they give it away at the end or they have the opportunity. Ball in, say, Phillip Rivers' hands, but they can't get that final drive, or they find a way. San Diego has become, in my mind, the AFC version of the Detroit Lions. Not necessarily a bad team, but they find a way not to win.
Yeah, they do. But even like Detroit this year, like they look better. I mean, they're in first place technically.
What the Lions were known for there for quite a while. I mean, when you looked at the, from the late 90s to the early part of the 2000s, it was really, how are the Lions going to lose this one? And I think a lot of Detroit fans would agree that's kind of their mindset that they had for a 15-plus year stretch of, okay, what are we going to do to blow this one this week?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, as a Vikings fan, like, all I thought about was, like, okay, so we got 2 easy wins this year because they're both going to be against Detroit.
Yeah.
But you can't say that anymore because, I mean, yeah, they're, especially without Calvin Johnson, I'm kind of shocked how good they are playing this year. If I had to pick a different team in that division, it's definitely Detroit.
Right, and I think... And without Calvin Johnson there, and now it's the fact that Matthew Stafford has the ability to spread it around. He doesn't have to look and say, okay, well, no one else appears to be open, so I'm going to lob it downfield and hopefully Megatron makes something happen.
Yeah, like probably throwing it away more. I mean, throwing it away is a very underrated part of football, for a quarterback especially.
Right. When you look at the other parts of that AFC, the North, again, Pittsburgh was one of those teams that came out really red hot. Now they're under 500 at 4-5. The Ravens actually lead that division 5-4. Cincinnati, another team that was a playoff team last year, but they're 3-5-1 right now. As you mentioned, Cleveland, they're on the track for 0-16.
They are, and with I can see they're going to win one game. I think they will win one game. Detroit will still be the only team to go 0-16 during a 16-game schedule. But I just see they have enough going on where I think they will sneak out one victory this year. I don't know where. I'm guessing against a division opponent, maybe this week against Pittsburgh, but I think they will get that win sometime this year.
Well, and that's the thing is, as much as we would really like to think about that, at a certain point, I think some of these players, they've got to mentally just check out, and they want to keep playing But really, I'm looking, just pulling up the schedule real quick. I know they've got Cleveland's home against Pittsburgh, then they host the Giants. They won't lose the week after that because they're on bye. So they've got a stretch now of 3 of straight home games. They'll be hosting Cincinnati, then they go to Buffalo, home against San Diego, then at Pittsburgh to end the season. And I think I don't see Pittsburgh losing to Cleveland twice, especially right now that their division is much more competitive than people thought it would be at this point when the Steelers were out in front and running. Now they know that these are games that they're really going to have to win if they want to get back on top of the AFC North.
And who knows? I mean, Pittsburgh hasn't looked that great down the stretch, and I mean, maybe Cleveland could get an upset. Sometimes I just want to pick them just to see what happens. And I'll be the only one to pick them, so maybe I can win some money. I'm all about winning money. That's what sports is all about. Am I right?
Foolish optimism for financial gain.
Yes.
Well, as long as you understand what you're doing, that makes sense to me. Now, I was to say another team as we kind of look to the AFC South. A lot of people were high on Jacksonville, and now the Jaguars have, at this point of the season at 2-7. They're the only team in that division that really isn't hovering around that 500 mark. Houston has kind of fixed some of their problems. They're leading the division at 6-3. Tennessee's sitting at 5-5. Titans coming off a big win over the Packers. Colts 4-5. Again, that huge contract to Andrew Luck. Does that kind of hinder them down the stretch here with getting the other pieces they need?
Not only that, but the owner calling it out like, yeah, we'd like to get some better players in here to help him, but we're paying him too much. Like, right. What the hell? It's not giving that's not giving anybody any confidence.
No,
you're almost saying you're gonna lose.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But yeah, surprising when you look at Houston again, 6-3, leading the division. They're 5-0 at home, so the road woes are what's really hurting them. But they have yet to play a road divisional game, so they've got 3 wins at home, or 3 wins against the division, I should say. But yeah, Houston, again, we'll see. At the start of the season, it did not necessarily look like the Texans were going to be anything that special.
I mean, I still don't even think they are. I mean, they're they have a soft schedule. I don't know. They're gonna lose. I think they're gonna lose a bunch of games down the stretch. The team I'm gonna call this the team I think that's gonna win that division. I'm gonna go with those Titans. I like that. Like, obviously, I was a big fan of them destroying the Packers over the weekend. And we should talk about. I want to talk about that. What is going on? Yeah, the Vikings have struggled down the stretch. What the hell's going on with Green Bay?
There we go.
Like, we have injuries to kind of use as an excuse and a terrible kicker. I mean, the Packers don't have a great defense, but what's happened to A-Rod the last 2 seasons? Because he looks a little different to me, and I'm not feeling bad about that.
Yeah, when we talk about that idea of what happened with Green Bay again, they went to Tennessee, ended up losing 47-25. It was ugly. I mean, right off the bat, it was 21-0 after the first quarter. The Titans just really put it on them. And Green Bay, we talked about, you mentioned with injuries on the defensive side for Green Bay. I know their, I think, top 3 corners are all out. I know Clay Matthews, I think, was out again he was out this past week. But, I mean, still, the offensive side, Eddie Lacy, he's hurt. James Starks still dealing with some injuries. I think he's coming back. But realistically, yeah, and even with their offensive line, they think that they've been able to keep a fairly consistent offensive line on the field, but they really just have not had that same, the same zing, the same force that they've held before on the offensive side. And one of the things I've heard people say, especially with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy, is the fact that it's been 11 years now, and maybe what the plans were are starting to get stale. People are kind of seeing the same thing over and over again, and you can only run those same plays so much before everyone else starts to realize what's going on and teams start to make adjustments to you.
That's true. And another thing, too, I really don't think McCarthy is that great of a coach. I think his success is all because of his quarterback. I think he is the most overrated coach in football, next to Andy Reid.
Well, and it certainly, I think one has helped the other. I think as much as, and people are going to say it's like, oh, they wasted, the prime years of Aaron Rodgers' life. It's like, well, but again, it's based on the whole team. The Packers end up winning the Super Bowl, was it 2010, 11?
10, yeah. Well, 2010 and then in February 2011.
Right, and then they end up going 15-1 the following year.
And then losing their first game
in the playoffs. I mean, again, it's, you can't sit there and say that they, they've made the playoffs, I believe, every year since, the year after Aaron Rodgers took over as starter. I think his
Correct,
first year.
I think the last time they didn't, it was either 2006 or 2007. It's been a good 9-10 years the last time they did not make the playoffs.
Right, and I think they went like 6-10 that year. So not an awful team. But again, and I think a lot of the Packers fans, this is kind of speaking from a generational standpoint, but people who are, say, in their 30s to 40s now, we're looking at people who were born in the, mid to late 70s into the early 80s, when they got to be anywhere from 10 to 15 years old. That's about the time the Packers and Brett Favre, the early 90s, they got good. Suddenly, games are on TV a lot more exposure. You've spent the last 20 to, we'll say 20 years, 25 years of watching a lot of football and seeing from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. And you had these Packer teams that, were always in contention. They were, the stretch in the 90s when they were facing the Cowboys in the playoffs, and it was, trying to get over that hump, and then getting to the Super Bowl, and then, taking on the 49ers, and, again, this group, I don't want to say it's spoiled, but it's this mindset that they've always had good teams. But you look at the drought that Green Bay had prior to basically, the 91-92 season, in that era, going back 10, 15, 20 years, the Packers were bad for a while. So now it's, an expectation, I believe, comes in because of, the success that they've seen over the past 2 decades with a generation of Favre into a generation of Aaron Rodgers, which is something that's very rare. Few teams have that ability to go from Hall of Fame A to Hall of Fame B. I mean, only a handful that I could think of ever that would have that opportunity, and to have that stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any. I mean, I thought the Colts would be the next one, but again, the same thing with Luck. I mean, he hasn't ever since when they lost to the Colts the Patriots big time in the playoffs, the Deflategate game. That was kind of like the falling out.
I mean, about the only, and it wasn't necessarily that long of a stretch, but you can, from Montana to Young in San Francisco, comes to mind. Drew Bledsoe, for what he was as a quarterback in New England, into Tom Brady, although that was much more successful on the back end of that one.
Yeah, because they went to at least one Super Bowl with Bledsoe.
Correct. I mean, and again, you only have a couple that you can think of. I'm sure we're probably missing one or two here. And it very well could be as from Romo into Prescott now. That could be another one of a changing of a guard, if you will. as much as people don't maybe want to give Romo the credit that I think he deserves, because again, he put a lot of that team on his back, and now that back is broken, but he has definitely continued to step up, and now in his age getting up there, his health, and kind of the next sheriff walks into town.
Exactly. Well, let's go over. I kind of want to go over some picks here for this week, because especially tomorrow night's game, the Thursday night game with Narlands at Carolina. Carolina is a 3.5-point favorite, but I don't trust them this year. I think Narlands will come in, the Saints will come marching in, and I think they can get that win.
Divisional games always scare me, and I know you want to get to this just because you've got money burning a hole in your pocket. They always say, they give the home team 3 points, so if you were to scrap that completely, Carolina would be like a half-point favorite.
Right.
But again, for me, divisional games always scare me because they know each other so well. They've seen each other so much. They, even if personnel changes, players change, whatever, they still know a little bit about each other, and that's the same way when we see Packers, Bears, Vikings, as you said. So I'm gonna say on the short week that Carolina will hold on here. If they win, it won't be a pretty win, but if the Panthers win, it will be ugly.
Yeah, for sure. They're just. I don't know what it is with it's just every year it's weird how much it changes. I know free agency happens and whatnot, but it's just such a drastic change. Are there any games this week you're especially looking forward to, like one that really catches your eye?
Yeah, I will be interested to see what happens, and I figure you'll end up talking about it just because, but just when I look at the matchup, Arizona-Minnesota, because these are two teams, again, that they're defensive-minded. They have their bright points on offense as well, but they're two teams that are kind of sitting there on that bubble. Again, Minnesota 5-4, Arizona 4-1. This is going to kind of have to be a turning point week, if you will, where if you end up losing, you either go to 500 or just below 500, depending on Arizona or Minnesota. And then what happens the rest of your season? Does that, again, we're starting to reach to that point where these wins become a lot more critical because you're starting to run out of options with, 6 games left after this week. You can go, okay, if you go 3-3 over your last couple weeks, well, you're 500. Is that good enough to make the playoffs? I don't know.
Well, maybe not make the playoffs as a wild card, but if your division is poor enough, you could. 5-4 is first in the NFC North right now. So yeah, and that game doesn't even have a spread. That Vikings-Cardinals game, it's just a pick one. Yeah. Both teams Vikings underachieving as of late. Arizona's kind of been a little underachieving. I don't have a tough one, but I'm looking forward to that one. The one I really liked, which one was that? I kind of want to see, Baltimore at Dallas. This might be one of the tougher defenses Dak has seen this year. So I kind of want to see, I'd like to see him go against a much tougher one. Dallas does come to Minnesota in a couple of weeks, but this one could be I think that could be a really good game with those two teams.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see what happens with that one, especially with the Cowboys, slight edge. They are at home. Dak's kind of been given the, if you want to say, the keys to the castle, as Tony Romo has said. Hey, he'll take the backup role now. This is Prescott's team.
There's the next question. Where's Tony Romo going to play next year? I've already heard rumors about the Jets.
And that's an interesting question, but I don't think Dallas can start shopping him just yet, because who knows what's going to happen here in the back half of the season. Will all of a sudden Prescott start to the pressure gets to him? Again, he has done a fantastic job, and I don't think he has a whole lot to worry about. But again, you never know going into these final games, and that's why I think seeing a test like this having the test at home for him against a Baltimore defense will be a good way. And again, that's not a spotlight primetime game where he can work on his mechanics.
Right, yeah. And I think the next primetime game they might have might be that Thursday night game in Minnesota. So it's like, time will tell. Again, both, I want to see the Vikings turn a corner because that injury bug is really getting annoying, but we could have Adrian Peterson back. So, again, it's still a lot of football left. I mean, so many teams are still alive for playoff spots, too. Like, everyone's right around that, 4-5 to 6-3 mark. That's just 2 games between, like, a good, maybe even a dozen teams that are still in it at this point.
Right, and there are so many, as you mentioned, there's only that handful of teams that are just, San Francisco at 1-8, Chicago sitting there at 2-7, Jacksonville at 2-7. Those are kind of the teams that you would say, all right, even Carolina right now at 3-6 still has a possibility. Could go on a run if they end up winning. End up getting 9-7 and could sneak into a wild card spot. Still a possibility. Long shot, but possible. But these are the most interesting parts about it is all these middle teams. And those are going to be the ones who will get hot in the back end of the season. And then suddenly you have your teams who are sitting there at 12-4, 13-3, who have kind of already cemented their spot in the postseason. And do those other teams who are hot keep rolling? We've seen that happen before with especially the Giants when they went to the Super Bowl. I think at both times when they went, they were one of the wild card seeds, and they just got hot at the right moment, rolled through the postseason. Let's see. I guess bye weeks for this week: Atlanta, Denver, the Jets, and San Diego. Kind of back to a more normal 4 teams on bye. I believe it's next week, Thanksgiving week, that every team will actually be playing.
Yeah, that is correct. I think they always try to put it in there between like week 3 or 4 to Thanksgiving week, and then it's just got to grind out the rest of the season. And like some teams, started off slow. They're playing off good, playing bad, but certain teams you just got to turn it on down the stretch, and that's honestly December and January are probably the 2 most important months for playing your best football.
Yeah, we talk about your Thanksgiving Day games, which is weird to think that Thanksgiving is already next week, but Minnesota and Detroit will be playing early on Thanksgiving Day. Washington and Dallas has the mid-afternoon game. The nightcap has Pittsburgh at Indianapolis. So
that's kind of at beginning of the year that might have been a good game, but I just don't. Yeah, like both teams are kind of underwhelming. I guess Roethlisberger's getting old. Like some of these guys are getting older. You forget about that because they've been around for so long. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Can't wait for the rest of just see how the rest of the season shapes up.
Well, another part of the season, we want to swing away from the NFL and start going some college football action.
I can go over a little. How about maybe 10 more minutes of airtime I can provide?
Sure.
Because again, I'm multitasking. I'm doing and then podcast stuff at the same time, so it's a little distracting. If you know what I'm saying.
That's fine. We can make it real quick here on college football action. Latest college football playoff standings. Alabama coming in at number 1, of course, 10-0. Ohio State at 2, Michigan 3. Those 2 teams will meet up next week. Big matchup for that one. Clemson checking in at number 4, then Louisville 5, Washington 6. The Badgers just outside the top 6 at number 7, then Penn State, Oklahoma, and Colorado rounding out your top 10. So again, you have 4 teams from the Big Ten making the top 10 in the college football playoff. Now, granted, two of these teams will be facing each other, so one of them will get bumped down. My big question is, do we really need to have 5 to 6 weeks of college football playoff rankings coming out from this committee?
I do not think so. I'm still waiting. What I want is for them to expand it to the 8-team playoff. Get 4 more. Make it a full. It's like what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, they have that whole month off of December almost to get rid. I don't know why they don't. I will say too. I saw this. Number 2, 3, and 4 all lost last weekend. First time since 1985 that has happened.
Yeah. So again, we have these rankings that come out, but what people fail to realize is over a 5-week span, several of those teams are going to lose, and it's going to completely shake this whole thing up. And what, if anything, do we actually learn from having these rankings over a 3 to 4 week span? You still know that, and the way it just always has been with college football is continue to win, and you will continue. You'll climb up. You'll find ways to move forward. And unfortunately, we've had teams that have lost, but they still make their way into that mix. And man, it's hard to take a look at some of these games, look at some of these teams, and really say, well, why do they deserve to be there?
Because the computer says so.
But there is no computer. That's the problem now. We've got this, a group of people who, they look at this, and now all of a sudden a team is ranked 4th this week. Well, if every other team wins next week, are they still number 4? Do they look like do they slide down? Do they, why are you losing ground? It's trying to find, I guess, a basis. There's no, in my mind, a level of consistency when they talk about, the quality of win, or, Ohio State losing to Penn State. Well, that moves Penn State up, but Ohio State's sitting there at number 2 right now. Now, granted, I know the teams ahead of them lost, but it's, where do these wins and losses suddenly, how are they weighing them? What is being weighed when they look at them? It's hard for me to make any real, any value judgment on this. And to me personally, I would like to see them scrap the whole 5-week, 6-week, whatever ranking system. Have a ranking come out essentially this week, the week before Thanksgiving, because that basically is here's where we're benchmarking people right now, teams right now, and then you would have essentially your final 2 contests, so you'd be having this coming weekend. Thanksgiving weekend is when a lot of teams wrap up their regular season. The big matchup, like Michigan, Ohio State right now, is, the huge matchup that's coming up next week. And then they have their conference championship games for the conferences that do have a championship game. And then you have your final rankings come out the Tuesday after those championship games. And that's it. And someone made a comment, I thought it was hilarious because no one else thought of it. We don't see this in, mid-February, the NCAA basketball selection committee that comes out and says, here's our projection of the 68 teams that will make it. If they did do that, people wouldn't pay attention. They would laugh and move on. But college football, it's
I think they didn't. It's so popular. I think they can just get away with it. Like, their fans don't care, or the really hardcore ones are just like, I don't know. I guess it builds up the.
Yeah, whatever they want to say tries to build up. Again, at the same time, from week to week, then having in my mind no basis for some of these decisions, you're if anything making people more upset because it's like a parent treating 2 kids differently. you've got, your son and your daughter, and one can go out and do one thing, but the other one can't go out and do it. And even if, they're only maybe a year or so apart. But again, being treated differently and different, the same situations. So, hey, this team won as well. Well, how come they're outside the top 5 now? So
it's all a mess.
It is a mess. I will say this much. I do appreciate the option that teams do have to, I guess, prove it on the field to get to a title game. How those teams are selected is still a work in progress.
I'm all out of juice right now.
Well, if we want to go ahead and we can wrap it up real quick. I know one of the things I did want to touch on, just so we get it out there, the people who enjoy NASCAR, I can't say the Super Bowl because that happens in February for you guys, but the championship for NASCAR, the Sprint Cup Series, coming down to this weekend, November 20th. It's going to be the Ford EcoBoost 400, Homestead Miami Speedway. 4 drivers left in the race for the chase. Jimmy Johnson, Carl Edwards, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch are your final 4. Matt Kenseth, Wisconsin native, was in the mix. Unfortunately, he had a crash this past week, and that knocked him out of the final 4. So one of those 4 who are remaining will be your NASCAR Sprint Cup champion for 2016.
Woo! They drive around in circles better than everyone else.
It's really more of an oval, but still, yeah.
That's true, yeah. A circular shape.
Well, as much as I'd love to tell you that I'll be watching that, I'll find out who won after the race, and that's as much as I can tell you.
Beautiful. Yeah, I probably won't know anything about it or hear anything about it, but go guy driving around in circles.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on before we go ahead and call it a night for this evening?
I got nothing else. Again, I'm pulling for my purple to get their heads out of their arses, and that's all I got to say about that.
And you're pulling for the Browns to finally get 1 win.
And I'm pulling for the Browns, just 1. If they get 2, I don't want to be too greedy, but if they can get 1, go Cleveland. Cleveland rocks, if I may quote the President of the United States of America.
I think it's also a song as well, but let's not get into that.
Well, the song is by the President of the United States of America.
Is it?
Yeah.
I had no idea that was
Drew
them.
Carey Show.
Yeah, I had no idea it was them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I learned something today. Hopefully you learned something too.
I did. I learned that we could do a podcast without those other mofos who usually join us.
And you could multitask like none other.
Booyah, kind of. Not very great, but a little bit.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time while you're multitasking, triple-tasking, to try to keep me sounding like I'm not a crazy person talking to myself.
Perfect. Hey, you can start talking to yourself as soon as I hang up. I'm going to do the same thing.
All right, you take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Disagree to Disagree. We will be back again chatting and probably full of turkey and gravy and mashed potatoes and whatever else is on your cornucopia of a buffet of deliciousness.
That's beautiful.
Take care. Have a safe weekend. The hunters of Wisconsin, gun deer season getting underway. So enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your Thanksgiving as well. And I'm sure somehow, some way, some of us will be back on here before